All right, Coach Galloway from Jacksonville, thanks for joining us. This is going to be a fun one, I think, to get to know you, get to know your program, and something for kids to watch as we get ready for this summer and what's been a really interesting time. First one, I guess, introduce yourself. How did you get into coaching? How did you get to Jacksonville? What was the path from, you come from a very strong high school program. You've been around good coaches forever. So how did you decide to make this your profession?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, thanks for having me. Obviously, have really been able to enjoy watching the growth of the 24/7 program, even when I was just getting out of college and coming down and working clinics, working at Duke, and having a chance to see it grow in North Carolina and obviously in the South as well, where I ended up. So my journey it's been fantastic. I was so lucky to grow up in a program similar to yours. We were fortunate enough to play against West Islip a couple of times in the state championship game, but really, in my youth, being able to be in a program that was like it was like football in Texas in my town. It was so important for a kid to, on Friday night under the lights, go watch a lacrosse game. And I grew up around an older brother and his buddies who all played for the program, admired the coach, admired the discipline that went into the team. And really, from a young age, started in a youth feeder program that taught me everything I needed to know about being a lacrosse player, but also just about being a good person. And that experience gave me the chance to play at Syracuse. And I was fortunate enough to stay at home and fell in love with, the idea of obviously playing in the Dome, but also the academic programs. And that's really why I ended up there. And from there, really had no idea I was going to coach. Met John Danowski at a camp, ironically, in Florida, my senior summer, and he offered me the volunteer job. I jumped in my Jeep about a week later and drove down to Durham, and the rest is history. But I spent a year in Durham. That was really, I look at that as like my graduate program for coaching. I learned everything really to this day on how to handle relationships, how to develop things on campus with professors and administration, and just how to be a good person. Coach Janowski, I think, embodies everything that our sport is. So that year was like my graduate program, and was fortunate enough to be given a chance with the assistant coach at the time, Chris Gabrielli, to go to Providence College for 4 years, and was given an opportunity to run a defense at 22 years old, was really thrown into the fire. And I certainly don't think I would have become a head coach at the time I did without that opportunity to learn and make mistakes and take chances. And 4 years later, got the call from JU, and a lot of people didn't know what the program was about, neither did I. And when I came to campus and saw the vision of the athletic director and the president, I fell in love with the place. I saw the path that they were headed down, and they wanted to make lacrosse important. And 4 years later, we have a brand new lacrosse facility. We have fully funded scholarships. We have a business school and an MBA program that our guys are thriving in academically, and we're starting to hit our ground in recruiting to put ourselves in a spotlight nationally to start competing with some of the best.
Yeah, like you said, we've been fortunate to kind of grow up in this together, me on the club side and you and the coaching side, and then obviously back playing. Two things just quickly, because our guys know, all of our kids, we use West Genesee drill a ton, and that's obviously a West Genesee staple. So did you guys actually use it when you were growing up, and do you call it West Genesee drill?
It's funny. I never knew what that was until I got into coaching, and we had never done that drill. And we did a variation of it. It was more like a 5-on-4 half field drill, but very similar concepts. But yeah, I don't think I ever did that drill, but everywhere you go, you hear it. And I think it's probably just a way of showing a little bit of respect to Coach Massera, and I think the impact he's had on so many other coaches.
It's been fun. Like I said, all of our guys know it. We'll do it to start every practice with some of our teams, so it's fun. And one more thing on your high school program, so a day in the life at West Genesee High School, we talked to our kids about it, just knowing it and trying to teach them the history of it. You guys are known for the wall ball requirements. What was it? What was every morning like at West Genesee High School?
Yeah, so from the fall and the spring, everything that we did was in the morning. So you'd wake up, you go to practice before class started, and you would do either a practice depending on the time of the year. You do some basketball court work depending on how the weather was, and if not, you would just go to the wall. And there was a requirement after practice you had to do it for 10 minutes. But when there were days out of season, you might spend 30, 45 minutes, and one of the tests you'd have to pass before you go, there's these bricks, these small red bricks, and you'd have to hit 10 of them before you left. So Coach Deegan used to sit over my shoulder, and you had to hit 10 of those bricks before you were excused to leave practice. And you might have had a 3-hour cooker, and it's 15 degrees out, and then you got to go play wall ball. Mentally really tough, but certainly a big reason why I think we weren't the greatest athletes, but I do think we prided ourselves on our skill work.
Yeah, we can obviously go on all day about your program, and honestly very different than what we grew up with in some ways, but obviously the similarities in what you're expected to do outside of practice. Mm-hmm. Anyway, flipping over to Jacksonville, obviously where you are now, What is this situation? I mean, this is weird for all of us with the COVID-19 situation, the quarantine situation. What is this like for your players? What have you been doing? What have your guys been doing? How are you all staying in touch? Just talk us through kind of the past 8 weeks, really.
Yeah, the challenge with everything that happened, and I'm sure it's the same for a lot of your guys, is just the uncertainty, the lack of closure. At the end, we actually played in Durham. We played Duke on Tuesday night, and on the bus ride back, we had started hearing about the Ivy League schools and what they were doing, and we had an idea, and we kind of knew at that point there was always going to be an asterisk on the season, regardless. And we actually prepared the rest of the week all the way up until Friday. We were going to play Mercer on Saturday, and I started to have a better idea of what might be happening. A lot of people were still acting business as usual, and we really just treated it as almost a postponement. For our seniors, we wanted to maintain hope if there were hope. The Southern Conference was one of the last leagues to cancel, so for us it was this weird back and forth with our guys, trying to keep them together, trying to have fun. That was the hardest part. We were trying to have fun without also showing our cards that this might be the end. And I think ultimately when it did come down, our seniors came together, and I was really impressed with the maturity of the young guys. But for anybody who played high school lacrosse or college lacrosse and knows that last game is coming, and then to not have it was heartbreaking. And I'm glad the NCAA did what they did, and it was the right thing for so many kids. But ultimately, the path is so different. Guys have job opportunities, guys have graduate school programs. There's financial restrictions to coming back to do another year of college. And we're going to get a handful of our guys back, which we're excited about, but it'll never be the same. And I think that's probably the hardest part for us right now.
Yeah, each season is different and has its own touch and feel, and you're never going to have the same 40 or 50 guys in the locker room. Mm-hmm. So you hit on it there. Talk about the extra year of eligibility. So everyone that was on the team this year was granted that extra year of eligibility, and kind of two parts of it. But the first part is, how is that going to impact your team? You started to say some of the seniors are going to come back. I guess, what is that going to do for the next couple of years with your roster?
Yeah, we were very fortunate in that we had a smaller senior class. Obviously, that was the year that when I got onto campus, that class was freshmen. So they were a little bit smaller. We've changed our recruiting cycle a little bit. So we were in a really perfect year for this to happen, ironically, where we only had 8 seniors. We'll probably have 3 of those guys back, and then our incoming class. So we'll probably be back to a normal roster size. The reality is, I think that the challenge that not enough people are talking about is down the road. This year, I think is for a lot of programs is easy, because the NCAA gave us an exemption for those guys and scholarships, and that not coming out of our 12.6. But next year, if a handful of juniors want to come back and that 2021 class is coming in, it's going to provide a lot of challenges, and coaches are going to have to be creative. And I think we've already looked 2 or 3 years ahead of time now, more than we ever have, to really make sure that we're being very clear with our guys and the rosters at a manageable size, so everybody still has a great experience.
Do you think it increases the level of competition? Just obviously a larger roster, more playing time, you have some older guys. Is it going to just, I guess, enhance the challenge every day in practice?
Yeah, by natural habit, having 5 classes in 4, and it won't be that. I think a lot of folks, a lot of guys that are in programs like yours are concerned about the recruiting path and what this is going to look like. I would just encourage them to remind them, the average that most coaches are talking about right now is about 25%. So you're talking about 2 to 3 guys that are going to be able to provide you some stability in terms of leadership and culture. And, one thing that we're doing that's a little bit unique is we're not asking our guys that are coming back to have any sort of role in leadership. They've done that. We think that our incoming seniors, so our this year's juniors, they deserve the opportunity to be leaders on this team. And we're going to ask the guys coming back, hey, you're coming back because you want to help us win a championship. That's going to be your role. And the guys that bided their time and earned it to this point, they're going to be our senior captains and leaders of this team. And our guys have been great about it. I think they almost were relieved to know that wasn't a pressure for them, and they can just focus on playing lacrosse that extra year.
Yeah, I think that's big. And what you do is develop, you talked about it earlier, developing young men and all the different facets of being a college lacrosse player, the academic, the leadership, and the athletic part. I think you're passing the baton onto a group that's an important, for my seat, the next phase of life post-college lacrosse. And the leadership part is really big. Mm-hmm. You started to talk about it, the 22s and the 21s. Like, obviously our guys are concerned that what is this going to look like, even in some of the 20s, of what's going to happen now that there's these 5 classes. How are you guys thinking about it in the recruiting process? Are you going to take the same numbers, more numbers? Is it impacting anything you're going to do? I guess, what is your approach to the recruiting process with those next 2 or 3 classes in particular?
Yeah, it's really not making a dramatic impact in terms of size. I think it's allowing us to be a little bit more thoughtful about our decisions. It's going to be, as I mentioned earlier when we were talking, I think it's going to be a little bit more like when we were in high school. You're going to find conversations of genuine recruitment in the senior winter, senior spring. They're going to allow guys to develop it and make sure that it's a right fit. And I do think that ultimately this might settle things down a little bit for a lot of kids who understand that this is something none of us have been through, and everybody had to hit pause. And it's going to allow kids, I'm sure guys in your program, to take the next 2 months to really check out what they're interested in. And there's always going to be a spot. There's never going to be a lacrosse player who is clearly a Division I guy that should be playing and he's going to get passed by. I just don't think that's going to exist. And I think we're going to start to see a lot more of these guys graduate and it to balance itself out over the next 2 years. So we're keeping it business as usual, but I will say we are being much more patient and thoughtful about our decisions than we ever have, just because we want to make sure that if we are going to bring in a 10-person recruiting class, that those guys have a spot, have a locker, are part of our plan going forward.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it too. Like I said, you take time, you get to know a kid and a family better, and is it the right fit? And I know we've pushed our guys to use this newfound time almost to do a ton of homework on the different schools, academically, athletically, geographically. If you were looking for something a couple of years ago or 2 years ago, does that change what you're looking for now, given the environment we're in, right? Maybe you want to stay a little bit closer to home. You want to stay in the South. Maybe that flight across country is different. So I think that it is, like you said, a much more thoughtful process.
Yeah.
I guess on that same recruiting process, the same recruiting world or theme, how do you guys approach it? So talk me through everything, building your depth chart, building your list of recruits, how you're coming up with those guys, the due diligence process. I guess walk me through when you walk into your meetings come September 1st and you're starting to talk about the junior class or whenever those meetings start, what are you guys hitting on and what does the whole process look like from your end?
Yeah, so we've actually just evolved this process, which is pretty exciting for me to talk about. Number one, when I first got here, it was all about talent acquisition. It was all about being able to infuse as much excitement and enthusiasm and a change of tone into our program. And now that we've established ourselves, we have guys that are starting from sophomores and freshmen down. We have juniors that have really bought into the leadership. Now we've started to reevaluate how we bring people into our locker room, because I think one of the finest things, one of the biggest concerns we have is to bring in a group of guys who don't ultimately understand the mission that we're on. So, we have been able to reevaluate our process, and we actually now have, it's almost like a rubric, and I don't want it to sound generic, but it really isn't. It's actually pretty detailed in how we look at it. And now we have, all three coaches have to have feedback in it. So it's almost like this 3-series process, and we've changed our mindset. Obviously there's this checkbox of athleticism and talent and skill set, and that gets you through the door. But now that we make the tough decisions, especially financially, it's all about culture. It's all about a more of a intangible skill set that's hard to measure when you're on a recruiting field, but you have to ask a lot of questions. So part of our rubric is you have to talk to 3 people outside of just the family. So the club coach, the basketball coach, and let's say a high school assistant or a JV assistant. We want to have a much better idea of what we're getting ourselves into, especially right now with the transfer portal being as crazy as it is. And, we're trying to completely avoid that. And that's probably the proudest thing that we have this year. Amongst all of this chaos, we have one guy leaving our program. And it was the best conversation I've ever had with a young man. It was the right thing to do in every facet for him. So we're not having any guys leave for lacrosse reasons. And I'm really, really proud of our staff, because I think we've changed our philosophy on that. And then the next piece too is we are puzzle piece recruiting. So we have changed from, hey, let's get the best 3 attackmen every class, to, hey, we really like our 2020 attack, or we really like our defense. Let's get the one guy that is going to be able to come in and compete right away. And let's not put 12 guys out there that are all pretty good, but 6 of them are going to be really unhappy. And I don't think we're sacrificing competition in practice. We're just making it so everybody on that depth chart has a chance and knows that in the back of their mind, one injury, one good fall ball, and that's all it takes for them to be able to leapfrog and put themselves in a position to play.
Like you said, it's so much more than just, I'm going to go get the guys ranked 1 through 10 on my board. It's like this pole fits this need, and this attackman is a lefty and is a better shooter versus this righty's a better feeder. It's all kind of a science more than just what the rankings say.
Yeah, and there's always, and listen, I'll never deny, if there's a 5-star guy and he's very clear cut the best player out there, yes, of course, he's going to be on everybody's board. But it's filling in that recruiting class with, you and I know those guys are usually your best friends. we don't want to bring in 3 lefty attackmen. They're going to despise each other throughout. We want to make sure that they can have this sort of relationship right away. And I think ultimately you get a better play on the field, a better product, because they really enjoy being together. And that's something we had with this year's freshman class. They weren't all guys that played right away, but they gelled in a way that we think that our culture took a step forward this fall and spring, just because those guys understood their role. And that was important to us, I think, in terms of our development.
That all the guys enjoyed being there. How many guys are you looking at? So you go into a summer, or you come out of this summer, when we get to September 1st or whatever the date is this year, just given all the movement, how many guys are going to be on that list for Jacksonville that all you and your coaching staff is going to talk through?
Yeah, the 2021 class will be much more finite. It'll be 30 to 40 guys in total across the country and in Canada. So, that sounds like a big number, but when you break it down by position, you're thinking maybe 3 to 4 goalies, 7 to 8 midfielder. I mean, it's a pretty small number. The 22 class, we have to be diligent. I think that one of our responsibilities is to not go to a tournament and make a decision. So that number, that list will be bigger. This summer it will evolve. I think, we'll have to put more emphasis on next summer, which for us, although it's frustrating because you want to build that class and you want to, have that, you want to have that person tweet out that you have a commitment. Well, it's not really for the best of your program. So we're going to be willing to wait probably until that, the summer of next year for those 22s, where we're going to have a much better feel for A, what we need, because we're going to be back with our team, but B, those kids are going to have a much better idea. And ultimately they're going to make decisions that are best for them.
Yeah, that's been a common theme with a lot of guys. Like this 22 class in particular will be a much slower process than the 21s. It's like you're going to see them in what is essentially, if we're lucky, a 14-day period this summer where you see them, and then it's much more compressed than what it's been historically. So if a kid doesn't play well, it's like you don't, or if he plays great, you're going to want to see him again come fall before you make that final decision.
Yeah. And I think, again, if I'm just making a bold prediction, but if you were to look in 5 years, that 2022 class, although I know that this is a big summer for them, they're probably going to have the most retention because of the decisions they're going to make and the timeline in which they make them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it goes back to the same theme of taking your time, doing your homework as you go through the process. Mm-hmm. What are the 3 or 4 things that you look for? You get to a field, and we've talked about the whole process, but the 3 or 4 things that you'd highlight to a kid, like that you're looking for in a guy you recruit. It could be academic, it could be athletic, it could be when you get to a field or you start to do your homework on a kid, what do those 3 or 4 boxes look like that you definitely want to check?
Yeah, I mean, it's different for every position. I am a product of West Genesee, so a skill set, a basic skill set that you feel like it has different nuances to it. Not a guy that's completely vanilla, but has clearly taken the time out of his schedule to create a toolbox for him in terms of skill set. And that could be defensively, what he does off the ground, at the midfield, how he's able to really, I look for almost how guys hold their sticks on the defensive end as a midfielder. I want to see, are they engaged? Do they take that as a point of pride, or are they just focused on getting the ball to the other end? Attackman, ultimately to play at this level at the attack, you have to have a slick, confident swagger about your game. And if you ride hard, that's just an easy checkbox. But in terms of body language, that's something that I've started to take a little bit more notes on, especially when things aren't going well. I've tried to check off more notes on just how guys react, especially to coaching and to adversity. What they look like when things are going tough. And that's specifically for the specialty teams like faceoffs and goalies, how they react when things aren't going well. I'm certainly guilty of being emotional after things don't go well, but how well do they bounce back, or does that start to tumble down throughout their game? So that's something that we're definitely looking for. Obviously, the multi-sport athlete guys, you can see right away. The guys that know how to have their head on a swivel, the guys that react in terms of physical situations. I mean, those are all things that you can pick up pretty quickly after you watch it for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the skill set of like you are an athlete or you're not. It just they carry themselves. They play sports in general just a little bit different than other guys.
Yep.
The other big thing that I think is always a black box in recruiting is the financial piece of it, right? So every school does it differently, and everybody I think approaches it differently. What is the financial piece when you talk about stacking versus the inability to stack, and how you guys look at it, and then how you think about the financial process? So what kids are getting scholarship? Is it academic, athletic? I guess all the pieces that go into the financial box at Jacksonville.
Yeah, I wish I could explain this more, because I think it's one of the biggest areas of confusion for most families. And for us, it's so different than it is at a place like Providence or Duke. So it's so important that when you are starting to look at these schools, you asked that question early on. We are a program that can stack merit and athletics. So a lot of people look at financial aid. We essentially replace financial aid because it doesn't meet need. And when you talk about a family that's coming in, applies for financial aid, well, there's going to be a gap there. And we want to try to close that gap with the other revenue that we have. So we use merit aid and financial aid. Merit aid is a bracketed system. So it's clearly based on your GPA, your SATs. As we are SAT optional, but if you do hit a certain benchmark, we will submit that. And it's very clear cut. So we can say, hey, junior year, you're at a 3.5 and it's X amount of dollars. And, if you stay at that mark, you're going to keep that and it'll only go up. And then the confusing part that a lot of families don't understand is there's an NCA number called exempt status. And that's a number. So when you come out of high school, it's a 3.5 or higher, unweighted or weighted, 1270, I believe, on the SAT, and a 112 super score ACT. And if you hit any of those benchmarks, you're exempt. So that means you can get athletic and academic aid, and it doesn't count against us. So the kids that have the largest packages at JU are a 3.6 student who's on 20,000 athletic, 20,000 merit, and that's, full tuition. And I think that's what we try to do, is package guys who academically are prepared and get that exempt status, or obviously athletically we fill the gap. But the nice part about that is you can achieve exemption status once you get to campus. So if you get a 3.0 after year one, now you can stack that money again. So it's almost like a carrot for guys that come out and might not be at that 3.5. All you have to do is come here and get a 3.0, and now the NCAA allows you to do that. So we're really lucky in that we get to stack, number one, and number two, we have bracketed scholarships for everybody. So even a guy that's a little bit lower, you're not going to get athletic, but you're going to get some sort of support right off the top, that then all you have to do is prove yourself on the field and get a 3.0. And it's like this motivating factor for a lot of guys. And I think it keeps our academics in this, for example, this year was our highest team GPA we've ever had in program history. I think a lot of it has to do with, they want to be able to make sure that they keep their dollars or continue to increase their dollars.
Yeah, they're constantly incentivized. And I think parents right away see the cost of education, but it's like when you start to peel the layer back and learn about all these different support systems, call them, and the financial piece of it, like you said, it can get very affordable very quickly if you take care of business.
Yeah, I think we're so fortunate. I often joke with, a lot of the people in the athletic department, how do some of these families do it? Because, the lacrosse programs, obviously you have the merit aid, but we have this ability to, there's no full scholarships being given out, but we have the ability to really reduce cost, make it so it's not only feasible, but it's financially responsible. And I think that's something we always talk about with our families transparently, because we understand. I mean, my mom was a nurse, my dad was a firefighter, and Syracuse is $70,000 a year now. I mean, it's crazy to think about. And I think you have to really be clear and transparent and honest with all of those avenues.
Yep, I agree. It makes everyone's life a lot easier. I think the sooner you have that conversation, everybody knows what's going on. I think it makes it a lot easier. Mm-hmm. Shifting, once you get those guys to campus, I guess, what does a day in the life look like for your guys once they get to campus? And then what is helping guys be successful when they're there?
Yeah, we're fortunate because of the weather that we get to really use the fall to just acclimate our guys. And, we actually did an exercise this fall with all of our newcomers and our team. We said, how many guys can, jump in their car and be home for dinner? And we only had 4 guys raise their hand. And that's the reality of our roster. So when kids get on campus, our first job is to make sure that they're comfortable. They're comfortable in their dorms, their dining, their classrooms. We really ease into lacrosse. We'll do some conditioning just to get a baseline. We'll get them in the weight room just so they get a feel for the locker room. And we'll start to do some individual work that's really so minute. It's 30-minute slots throughout the day based on their class schedule. So they're never being pushed to the limit early on. And our upperclassmen do a great job. We have these little family groups for each of our guys. But September is spent really just getting used to your class schedule, used to the patterns of going back and forth, and then getting with us as individually as coaches just to get a feel for our voice. So that's really the schedule in September. It's our 8-hour phase. Once we get into October is when we go into our 20-hour phase. And in our 20-hour phase, we only use about 12 to 13 hours. We give them the weekends off. We usually do one day off during the week. And that's when we're starting to just acclimate them to a team practice, what that looks like, while also increasing our strength and conditioning. And then November's are a lot slower, back to kind of that September model. So the fall, a lot of people get caught up with this year-round lacrosse, but the fall is all about learning the pathway to the spring. The spring is a little bit more rigorous. We do group lifts. That's something that we've changed instead of team lifts, just to get our guys in smaller groups and just have it a little bit more focused based on their class schedule as well as practice schedule. And that allows practice, I think, just to be a little bit sharper, that they know, at 6 o'clock at night, they're not changing and going into the weight room. They have that freedom. A lot of our guys live at the beach, which is about a 15-20-minute drive. So for them, for us to be able to wrap up practice, treatment, ice bath, shower, and then they can move on to dinner and head back to the beach. So we try to be really thoughtful of their process and understand that life's a little unique down here, and we want to make them comfortable, but also when they're in the office and, at work with us, they're completely focused.
You're about to be the only coach in the country that can say your guys live at the beach.
It's hard to fathom. It really is. It's just a unique way. I mean, we had a bunch of our guys are still in here because Florida has been one of the better spots and a lot of hot spots. Like we had two twins that live in Washington State, and a lot of people obviously from New York and New Jersey. And we took a bike ride, my wife and I. We saw a bunch of our guys playing 3-by in the sand, and it's a unique place to be able to have a college experience.
That's awesome. What is a day in the life in the spring? So your guys, when are they're up in the morning? Are they going to class or practice or meetings? I guess what would a standard day, a Tuesday in season look like?
Yeah, we shift to the afternoons for the spring, and we will have 2 morning meetings in the beginning of the week. And what we try to do there is just to not overflow them in the afternoon. So we'll have our scouting report meeting with the defense, or offensively, we'll just introduce the game plan. But beyond that, it's mostly afternoon. Every day at 12 o'clock, we have an optional individual session. So based on their class schedule, from 12 to 1 is a pretty open slot at JU. So all the coaches go to the field and turn on the music. And if you want to come out, that's where we do a lot of our individual work. And then usually by 2:30, the guys are in the training room getting ready for practice, treatment, rehab, or just tape. We hit the film room around 3. We'll spend anywhere between 15 and 30 minutes, depending on the day. We have theme days, so they know what's coming. There's some days it'll be just an offensive shooting day, so the defense will be in there. The defense spends more time traditionally for the game plan. And then we're on the field. We do 90-minute practices. We cut it at 90 minutes. We put on the scoreboard, and they know. Obviously, if we're having serious troubles, we'll hit the pause on the scoreboard, but normally it's no more than 90 minutes. And that way we can have them out of there by around 5:15, give them time to be able to shoot, hang out, spend some time with us. If we have to do any special teams, man up, man down, and then they're probably out of our facility around 6 p.m.
And then it's tutors or academics or whatever type of requirements they have off the field.
Yeah, so that's why we're really thoughtful, because study tables, all of our guys are required study tables when they get there. We're fortunate that JU is a really athletic friendly campus, so we have our own academic services building where our guys do their study tables, meet their tutors. They can go to the library, but most of the guys will just stay in the athletic center, and that's really where our freshmen are spending a lot of time in there. And as we start to pass that freshman year, we start to recognize the 3.0 and belows and make sure that our at-risk guys are getting the help that they need. And the guys that can handle themselves and know how to time manage, they get to start to reduce those hours going into the sophomore year.
Take the reins off a little bit. Well, the last thing I have for you is we've talked about, your path. And you've obviously, we talked about your coaching. We didn't even get much into your playing, but we've talked about, Jacksonville, the recruiting process this summer. What advice do you have to guys, whether they be youngsters that are picking up a stick, in their first or second year playing lacrosse, that have seen John Galloway on TV, the player, or if it's guys in the recruiting process that have probably seen John the player and started to think more about John the coach? Just what advice would you have for all those different stages?
Yeah, my perception has changed so much growing up as a kid who was just so serious about the game and just constantly involved in wanting to get better, to being able to see it from a more art side at Syracuse, where it wasn't so fundamentally focused, to at Duke, where it's all about relationships. So I've had these changes in perception where I can say that the game is just really meant to be fun. I think if it's not the best part of your day, then something's going on. I find myself, I never have gone to work a day in my life because of my profession. And if you can find a way to make sure that this is the best part of your day, whether it's being able to spend time with your teammates, for the guys that maybe aren't as serious about it, but just enjoying it as they are younger and getting used to playing the game, that should be the best part of the day too. When you're in your club program and starting to look at potentially the recruiting opportunities, but also just to develop the rivalries that club lacrosse gives that we never had. I never got to play Long Island teams unless it was either an Empire Games or the state championship once a year. And I just don't think that was enough for me to develop that type of rivalry. So enjoying that rivalry, not playing just for the guys on the sidelines, but playing for the guys on your sidelines who, have this new responsibility to represent the South. And I think that that's something that you can take, that some kids take for granted, that if you take a lot of pride in, that's going to be something that the coaches will pick up on as a positive. And then obviously, if you do have the opportunity to get to the college ranks or even the professional ranks, the game doesn't change. There's no new system in place. There's no new stick. The field's still the same. It's just your attention to detail and your willingness. It's every kid's decision how great they are in college lacrosse. And you have to make that choice every day. That's the reality in the weight room, in the classroom, and obviously on the lacrosse field. And if you really love the game, that choice is easy. And I think that we have been fortunate enough to have a path where we could continue our careers. And I can tell you this, if you told me when I was 15 that at 31-year-old I'd be playing professional lacrosse on TV, I would call you crazy. So I enjoy every chance I get, and obviously, hopefully, looking forward to doing it here in a couple months.
Yeah, that'd be great. Like you said, we started this in our junior year of high school, and now getting older and still doing it.
It's crazy.
All right, man. I appreciate it very much. It's great to learn about Jacksonville and everything you guys are doing. And like you said, hopefully we can get on the field and see each other, whether it be playing or on the recruiting side and then the coaching side here in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me again, Ryan. I really do appreciate everything you do. It's fun to watch.
All right, man. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Have a good one.